Hi, Ben.
Hi, Carl.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing our little pre-call clap synchronization moment at a normal tempo. Um, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go
Listen to
listen to
last
the
week's.
first,
Yeah, go
the
listen to
first
last
like
week's
30
episode.
seconds.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
But
Yeah, but
that
you
was
don't know
that,
until now. It's just been AI Ben, but now it's real Ben. Now that I'm doing real life tempos, that was just the AI version of me doing it. So
there we go.
yeah, the real me is into fast tempos. I'm like a 130 BPM kind of guy,
I think
in the
in
club.
all seriousness, I think you did actually count that down at about 130.
Really? Could be.
Yeah.
It was bum bum bum. Yeah, it's about 130. I
Yeah.
I, I I always thought about like the idea of like there's like perfect pitch and then there's like perfect tempo. 116.
Oh, I'm sure. I feel like if anybody has that, it's like Nate Smith or
Yeah.
somebody.
Yes, Nate Smith or Purdy from the Purdy Shuffle. One of those kind of
Oh,
guys.
yeah.
The
Yeah.
upper echelon of session drummers. Steve Gadd.
Yeah. So good.
132.
So
Do you find that there's like certain like rhythms that like just work better for production? Like I feel like there are certain rhythms that don't work as well. Like 93 never works as well as 92 or 94. I don't know if you feel that way.
I
This
don't.
is such a random tangent.
That is a random tangent. But I like it. I'll say this. I do like odd numbered tempos, but maybe it's because they're less common. I think it's purely a subjective thing. I don't think they objectively work better or worse. I think it comes down to the human experience, what we've listened to a lot of. And I know when I was doing a lot of remixing back in the mid 20 teens, like especially the styles that I was working in, a lot more like chill, like synthwave before synthwave was like a thing, but much more like synthy classics kind of stuff. 108 always felt really good. 112 felt really good. 116 felt really good, and for whatever reason, it was always in groups of four.
Four. Yep.
But when I would then, if I was working on a song at 112 and I just wanted a little bit more energy, bumping it up to 113 sometimes would just completely change the dynamic of it. So I will agree with you that I do feel very sensitive to tempo changes.
Same.
However, I don't think that there are any that will like objectively work better than others. I think for every single song, there are definitely tempos that will work best for that song. And I do feel that producers don't experiment enough with those slight variations. Like they'll pick a tempo that they start with and they just keep that tempo for the entire duration of making the song instead of thinking, oh, I wonder, now that I have more context, how would this feel 1 BPM slower or 1 BPM faster?
Something I noticed is like when I listen to podcasts at like 1.4 speed, because that's just one of the options on Google Podcasts, which I like. I just get used to like intro music for podcasts at like 1.4 speed and it sounds good. If I like slow it down, like this is a weird sounding intro music. You just get used to that.
Should we actively slow down our intro music?
That's exactly what I was thinking. No. Yeah, just slow it down, baby.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay.
Well, this is completely off topic, but maybe it's kind of on topic because this episode we decided to call "Leaning into Your Quirks," or we'll probably rename it. But that was like the headline: "Leaning into Your Quirks."
Yeah.
And we're leaning into our quirks a little bit about tempos and random stuff. But yeah, we thought it would be interesting to talk about things that make us tick and why we need to kind of double down on those things. I feel like this has like been my big lesson of Secret Sonics. Or there've been a few big lessons, but one of the big lessons was like, do your thing. Because if you're trying to do someone else's thing, you're going to just do a bad version of that other person's thing. Versus when you do your thing as well as you can, then no one else is going to be able to do that because it's you. Even if you're not as good, even if I'm not as good of a bass player as, I don't know, Joe Dart, I could still be the best Ben Wallach bass player, right? Even if I'm not as good of a mixer as Carl Bonner, I could still be the best Ben Wallach mixer, right? Because I'm leaning into the things that I do and the things that, that move me. And then hopefully my taste attracts the right artists to work with me. So I don't know. That's kind of like a preface of what we're going to talk about. What do you think? What do you think, Carl?
I agree. And I want to I want to hit it right back to you, and I want to ask you, what do you think some of your quirks are musically?
Mm, what are some of my quirks? Well, I like no surprises here. I like a big bass. I want to hear the bass. I think for me, uh, growing up as a bass player, and not necessarily hearing bass parts in songs would drive me nuts. And so like, and then when I found like Motown, and it's like, oh, this bass is like the whole record, that really resonated with me. And also like Beatles and stuff, where like like in Sergeant Pepper's, they recorded Paul's bass last, so it's kind of like above all the other things in the tape. Uh, so that's definitely something that speaks to me. And as like a bass player, I always wanted to hear the bass. I remember I spoke with another mixer on the show, Shahar Busani, a while back, also a bass player, and also just like obsessed with like making sure everyone could hear the bass at all times. So sometimes that's hurt me, and like I'll even go the other direction because I'm like too conscious of like if maybe the bass is too loud. But I'm always trying to, if I can, and it's genre appropriate, I'm always trying to get the bass to sound nice and full, no matter what. That's kind of something that I'm always leaning into. And also in my productions, I'm always leaning into the bass because I'm most comfortable there. So the bass will often be the trigger for whatever comes next as a creative idea. Like I'll record bass pretty early on in a production in order to kind of guide things and change the momentum, because it's just where I can lean hardest and make the most positive impact, I think, sometimes on a record. So that's kind
Yeah.
of my biggest quirk. But there's other ones also, but that
I
might
want
take a
to,
long time to
well, yeah,
get
I
to.
want to say, like, I think what's interesting, and maybe this is a slightly better way to frame this conversation, is instead of just saying, like, instead of just like figuring out what our quirks are and just saying lead into your quirks, which is still kind of like a fairly ambiguous thing to tell somebody. But what I'm curious about is kind of what you already said in there, where you were saying these are my tendencies. This is a tendency that I have to make the bass fairly prominent. I want it to be heard. I want it to be, appropriate, but like make sure that its voice is heard. But then you were also talking about how that actually informs and influences what you do. So it's not just your quirk, but it's also like the manifestation of that quirk, or how that the application of that
Hmm.
quirk, right? And that also, I'm sure, affects what kind of music you're drawn to working on as well. Not just in general, but also probably like certain artists or certain songs that come across your desk. You're like, oh, I feel like I'm in my zone because the quirks that are kind of natural to me, like they're encouraged to come out here, and
Yeah.
I think they work really well. Would you say that's a fair statement?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm definitely drawn to bass heavy music. So like if it's pop music, it's more likely to be something along the lines of like, I don't know, that Charlie Puth song Attention with like the crazy bass line, or, Uptown Funk, or, I don't know, even something like the Dua Lipa stuff with like the heavy disco bass or whatever.
Yeah.
Um yeah. And if, not pop music, sure. you
Yeah.
know, like some of the Jacob Collier stuff, which just has like massive low end. Uh, I'm trying to even think of an example that would that draws my ear. I'm like, oh, that's it. It's got the Pinot style thing, like that voodoo kind of bass line.
Mhm.
That stuff totally will zone me in. How about you, Carl? What's like what the first quirk you'd want to share with the audience that you know, and maybe you could get deep about like what it does for you.
Where do we draw the line between quirks and tendencies? Or are they
I think
synonymous in
I think
this?
they're synonymous, unless it's like a quirky thing. Like unless it's like
Yeah.
not a tendency, it's just weird.
Yeah.
Like maybe bass
Um,
isn't weird, but like I feel like most people don't listen to the bass the way I listen to the bass. But I
well,
also
it's
think
not weird. It doesn't have to be weird, but it is something that you've identified and is not a commonality between all producers or all mix engineers.
right, right, sure. Well, your
Um,
quirk could be
yeah.
quirky and maybe different.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of contrast in songs and in mixes, and specifically like momentary contrast, like moment to moment contrast, not just like quiet versus big loud choruses. I mean, like even within a quarter notes gap of time, having contrast and things in there. And one of the ways that I think that really comes out in my mixing decisions is I do a lot of automation on my effects sends, specifically a lot of like automating the volume all the way out. Like I don't do I feel weird saying like a mute automation because I'm not automating the mute function, so it's just
Just
kind of one of those things where
the volume
the
of like the FX output or whatever.
yeah. So I'm not so like especially in like the little moment, like the little quarter note, eighth note, whatever before a big chorus. Like if I want that big chorus to sound full, I need to make that moment before it sound really empty. If I want it to sound wide, I have to make that moment before it sound really narrow. If I want it to sound, big and deep and tall, then I need to make that moment before it kind of like smaller and more centralized. If I want it to sound really like a lot of depth and a lot of character, then I want to make sure that that moment before it has very little depth and character. So that's you could call it a quirk, you could call it a tendency, you could call it an unhealthy obsession, but that's definitely something that I do a lot of in mixes, and even just automating automating the width of a mix, not like adding width to it necessarily, but like having whole sections be just bringing the outside borders in a little bit, so that way when it gets
Mm.
to the big courses, it feels like it gets
Yeah,
bigger
yeah,
because it
yeah.
gets bigger. But like little things like that where I really want there to be a lot of things that catch the listeners off guard, and a lot of times that can come through as little ear candy pieces that grab your attention, but you can still have the feeling of ear candy by just adding those little moments of contrast where all of a sudden everything dries up like a vacuum for that little split second.
Do you think being a
And
drummer has informed this quirk of yours? Because like
I'm sure.
you're just like constantly playing with the rhythm and like how busy is your hi-hat, or maybe you'll just like stop playing the hi-hat for a second and just like give that some space. Maybe that, like me as a bass player, like I'm always like listening to the harmony and like the rhythm and the groove, but I don't necessarily think about the micro rhythmic things that you do, right? Because like your background might like inform that.
I mean, I think you're on the right track for me, but I think it's actually less about my experience as a drummer and more about my experience like in college as an orchestral percussionist. Because my degree was in orchestral percussion, so like a lot of like timpani, marimba, you know, triangle, that kind of stuff. Um, but and if you've done any of that style of music, any kind of like concert band music or orchestra music, there's a lot of resting. There's a lot of
Mm,
waiting your turn
yes.
and a lot of space. And I think because of that, you grow to have a real deep appreciation for the way that all of the little pieces kind of interlock and leaving space for other things and knowing when it's the right moment to like knowing that if you hit the big concert bass drum, big like 40-inch concert bass drum every four measures, it's going to get old real quick. But if you save that for that one big moment towards the end, it is going to give everybody chills. And I think that is I would say most of my mixing decisions are informed by being an orchestral percussionist. I think because it makes me okay with space. It makes me okay with something happening just one time in a song,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
I think it's also like a
Yeah.
super newbie thing to just like always adding more, we've talked about this, I think, like let's just we'll add this and then it's going to be until the end of the song, that now that we're adding cellos, they're not going away, right? Like, but that could get a little bit boring.
So what are some other quirks that you have that
Wh-
maybe what are some quirks we could stick with another like musical quirk, but then I do want to kind of get into your personality bit.
my personality. Well, my musical quirk is I hate the solo violin. I think it's the worst instrument. I love violins. I love going to see an orchestra and hearing violins from, you know, 50 feet, 80 feet away, right? But when a microphone is like, I don't know, a few feet from a violin, and it's just one, man, that is not the thing. It is just squeaky. I guess I'm just very like attuned to harsh frequencies. I think my hearing is sensitive to that, and I just
Yeah.
like really don't want to hear it. And it really, for me, it's like nails on a chalkboard to hear like almost always, unless you're an amazing violinist, and even then, like I'd rather not have one violin. Cello, great. Violin, forget about it.
My 7-year-old is bringing home a violin next Tuesday.
Oh God, good luck.
Yeah.
That is
She's
not the
doing,
instrument
like,
I'm going to lead my kids towards.
yeah. Well, that's the first thing that she could do. She's in 2nd grade, and they had a violin program, and I was like, well, I want to get her started. She was really interested in it, and I'm like, let's
That's amazing.
we'll do it. But I think violin, I've always said this, violin and oboe are 2 instruments that either you sound like the concertmaster of a major orchestra, or you sound like you're in middle school. There's such a, you know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah.
such a gap between being really good and being the best. And I
Yeah.
feel like even in college, like people that were, they were seniors in college studying this, their whole lives, and you listen to it and no, thank you. And I feel like that's why I have such a respect for
The really good ones.
violinists and like double reed players, because it's so insanely difficult. And actually, did I ever tell you my my personal hell? Like what my description of my own personal hell is?
No, but I'm starting to imagine what it might be.
Yeah. So this is a little sidebar, but this is my personal hell would be a 3rd grade oboe choir. Okay, so like I'd say like 80 kids playing oboe for the first time, and the song that they're playing is Hotel California. And they're all playing Hotel California. They're in 3rd grade playing oboe for the first time, and there's 80 of them. But as the song progresses, they get through the intro, they get through the verse, and just as the first chorus is about to kick in, they all stop and they go back to the beginning, and they never actually get to the payoff of the "Welcome to the Hotel California," but like the squeaky oboe version of that. It never gets to that part. So there's also the added like build up, just hoping that this time,
Just get
this is going to be the time.
Release.
This is it. This is the release. I'm just in purgatory. This is gonna happen, and then I'm gonna be able to. No, it's just you always think this is the time that they're gonna play the chorus and give me that resolution, and they don't.
Yeah, for like a jazz guy, it would be like hearing somebody shredding electric guitar and just doing the 2 to the 5 without ever getting to the 1,
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah.
That would probably be less of our hell. That 2-5 is actually kind of a cool progression, but whatever. Anyways, that's like the funk progression.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think I'd rather have a 2-5 guitarist than
Oboes.
80 oboe children. But
Yeah.
to each their own.
Teach their own. That's a very specific hell.
It is. It is.
And it's quirky.
And it hasn't changed.
It's quirky. It's quirky as hell.
Yeah. So okay, so
we're getting weird here.
we are getting weird, but I think that's something that when it comes to our quirks, like yes, our quirks are going to come out in our music and our musical choices, but I think also, especially as professionals,
Yeah,
they're going to come out in the way that we handle client interactions. They're going to handle the way that we build the relationships with the people that hire us and trust us with their music.
yeah,
So I think one of my quirks in that sense is my fearlessness for just like telling a dumb story like that. Like that, I know that's ridiculous, and I feel like if there are any therapists listening, they're probably like, "This guy should talk about that with his therapist on Tuesday." But I think that's something that for the right clients, the right ideal clients for me are going to find those kind of things endearing, right? So quirks aren't necessarily just something musical, and they're not just something irrelevant, right? It's if we can figure out which of the quirks that we have are going to be endearing or useful or interesting or a really great icebreaker for potential clients, then they can also be your superpower.
Right.
right? So what are some quirks about you that you're
Hmm.
aware of
Well,
that,
yeah, I was
yeah,
just like, my brain was like, well, because I hate violin and I hate harsh frequencies, that made me kind of be too hard at eliminating harsh frequencies at a certain point in my career, and now I do that less and whatever. But that's like a whole other musical side tangent. But I don't know. I think people always like hanging with me, and I think, but that's like, is that quirky? I don't know. I think that's,
but
I mean, I think my
well,
superpower as like a person, as like a producer mixer, is like people like spending time with me. Like, I think people don't, you know, detest me like some, potential other audio engineers. And like, I think
but
just me
why
being a
though?
people person.
But I think that's okay. So you're a people person, but like what I that's what
So
I'm
why
curious
am I
about
a
is like
people person? So
why?
now we're
Well,
gonna go
that
into
are
therapy. What, I'm the oldest child. I've always been a bit of a people pleaser for sure, no doubt about it. And that's definitely something that is also a weak spot for me, right? Being a people person. Uh, but it's also been one of the great things that has, carried me through my life of being a people person. Trying to please people has enabled me to foster friendships and and uh, and be trustworthy, be a trustworthy person to, like, if you hire me, you know that I'm not going to just like let things slip through my hands because I care too much and I'm too afraid of you, I don't know, hating me if I don't. So it definitely has helped me become a professional person and like take on these adult responsibilities in a very effective way, even if it's not always a healthy way for my anxiety, if that makes sense.
yeah. But I guess like
Is that
but
quirky? Is
so
that, I
that's
don't know, are we getting into
well
quirky territory?
what I want to figure out is like well what not like why are you that way? It's more a matter of like why what about you? What about hanging out with you? What about talking with you? What about collaborating with you is draws people in?
Yeah, I think being that kind of people pleaser, people person thing enables me to be more empathetic, or at least come off as more empathetic. I mean, I think I am empathetic, um, and that helps everything. That helps people open up to me, helps them open up when they're singing, know that I'm here and I have their back, and they're not, if I'm recording a vocalist, that they don't need to be ashamed of. We're here, like we're doing the, like I'm the support team. I think that it all is tied in. So in many senses, my like quirk of being a people person and be a people pleaser really has helped me in like everything I've done.
Yeah.
As like a professional's audio music service provider. Like
And as a friend too.
and as a friend. Yeah,
And as a podcast host?
yeah. I did. That's a very good point. I I I I always felt it was weird, but people always felt very comfortable opening up to me on this podcast. When I used to have guests on all the time, I'd be like, "Why is this person opening up to me?" And
Yeah,
this is
and
something that I've had my whole life. Like when I would go on like a airplane ride, and like I'd be sitting next to some random person and they would tell me their life story. Like that's just been the story of my life. Like people just talk to me and confide in me. It's a bizarre gift, but it definitely has its uses, and
yeah, and
it's
I
interesting.
mean from the other side, I'll say that like that's exactly how I felt. The very first time that I was on the show, it was weird how comfortable I felt because it was
Really,
also one of the very first podcasts I was ever interviewed on, I think.
really.
And I just felt super comfortable talking with you. And that's never changed. It's not like you put on a really, you put on a happy face for that hour and a half that we talked. It was like, no, that's just you. And I think when we think of quirk, we think of something extreme and something very weird. Like, oh, my quirk is that my left pinky is 3 feet long. You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't have to be like that. It can be just something that isn't as common as we wish. And I think your level of empathy and your desire to understand the person that you're talking with, it runs deep in you, and I think that's also something that not enough people have. But it is
Yeah,
something that people want to be around. They want to be around people that care. And not I mean, I'm sure some people want that from a selfish way or from a selfish perspective, but I think also just as humans, we want to be around other people that care, especially the people that they themselves care deeply about things and they're empathetic.
Yeah. And maybe they're even feeling insecure about the song that they wrote and they don't know if it's gonna have the, meet the standard that they think they need to meet or whatever.
Yeah.
Uh yeah, well, thanks for that. This has been a
Yeah.
therapy session for Ben now. Uh, how about you, Carl? Tell me a little bit about some maybe the quirks that have helped you as like a, person providing services and being a professional and doing this thing that we do.
I mean, I'd say probably my practiced fearlessness of just like starting conversations, like my practiced extroversion. That definitely
Mm,
does not come naturally to me. So maybe you could say like a quirk about me is the fact that I understood and was willing to try to figure out how to do that because I knew it would be
mm,
in my best interest, not just in my best interest as a business owner, but in my best interest as a creative and a collaborator and somebody that wants to meet cool people. Because what I've found is that not a lot of people want to do that. Nobody, people. It seems like people are either. I don't fully believe this, but I'm going to say it. Like it seems like a lot of people are either born fearless or they're born fearful in certain things. And I actively
nature or
am
nurture?
nature and nurture, and I'm
It could
trying
go either
to
way.
act. I'm trying to like actively get over some of those fears, but not all of them. Like I'm still like pretty terrified of heights. Even just I was at Sky Zone, which is like a little trampoline park nearby, for a friend's daughter's birthday party, and I took my oldest daughter to it, and I was like, oh man, if I jumped off this thing, it's like maybe like 6 feet, 7 feet high. If I jumped off this with my camera in slow mo, I could use this for one of my new Music Friday posts. I could just have that be like the background visual. I could not get myself to just like fall off of like a 6 or 7 foot little podium into a gigantic pit of foam. Like I knew intellectually that this is going to be totally fine, but I could just not emotionally get the courage to do it. So when I say that, I'm not
Wow.
saying that I am I I try to tackle fears head on in all aspects of life because I feel like that's more of a trait of somebody that was just that is has a fearless personality in general and they just want to attack those fears. I'm very much not that. I'm a very practical and tactical fear challenger, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, this is definitely like another thing to talk about in therapy.
Yeah, I think if you did jump off that, or if you push yourself to do it, it could open up. I once saw like a business coach, and he told me he's like, dude, you just got to go like skydiving or something, or like do a crazy zip line. Like people that do these things, they just have crazy breakthroughs. I'm like, I still haven't done that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but like when you push yourself, which you have in some aspects, like you're able to work through crazy stuff. It's a good muscle to flex.
Yeah, so maybe that quirk is that I've found a way to do that in some aspects of life and absolutely not able to do it in other ways.
We
I
can't
think
get it all.
maybe it's like I've gotten over the fear of social harm and have not gotten over the fear of physical harm,
Right. Okay, well,
even when
that's
it's
good.
irrational.
Listen, so one will actually hurt you and one won't.
Yeah,
So,
one will hurt my feelings, one will hurt my 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 bones.
so do you think that's like a quirk that you've like figured out I mean, I guess it's a quirk because you're just you come off as just like totally bubbly and like not worried about what people think about you at all, you know?
Yes, I don't know if that's a quirk or a tendency or a habit or a disorder. I don't know. I don't know what to call it. But it is something that I feel is, fairly unique. And I think that's really what we
Yeah.
were trying to get
I think you're
get
able
at in
to I
this.
think you're really effective at that stuff when people like myself are more afraid of leaning into, you know, just being out there all the time cuz it's just so nice to come back into your man cave or woman cave or whatever. and you're just constantly living on the edge, and it's helping you meet people, and it's helping maintain your career because of that, you know?
Yes, but I think also it's balanced by the fact that I live not in a music city and I work fully remotely. So I don't have to be, extroverted and do in-person sessions. I don't have to be, I'm not going out to shows every night. I'm not meeting people in person all the time. So I only have to like go into that mode when I need to go into that mode.
Right.
But it's because I know that going into that mode is going to help me to more effectively communicate the things that I'm passionate about. It's not just like, oh, doing that and putting on my salesman hat. It's more that if I want if I want to help, if I want to help move the needle on the things that I really care about and I'm really passionate about, then I need to be vocal about that and I need to be able to get over that internal hump because this is something that I think is really important, not just for myself, but for all the people that I work with and I meet and I teach. So I think that was enough. Now that I'm thinking about it, that was, I think, what pushed me to push through it. Whereas me getting a cool slow-mo video was not enough to push me quite literally over the edge,
Yeah.
to jump into that pit.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
want to get deeper with you. What about like maybe that is deep enough because you by being out there you're able to communicate with all those people. But is there anything else that you do or that like once you're working with an artist and you're working on the mix and you're in communication, any other quirks there that kind of help you
Uh,
once that relationship has been established, right?
um, so I don't know if this is a quirk or if this is just something that I don't know many other people doing. I think it's part of it is the way that I communicate about mix notes and how we talked before on an episode about how I try to send them mix one at like the 80% mark,
Yeah.
not expecting it to be perfect. But I think also the fact that I go out of my way to try to keep in touch with artists after the project, not
Yeah.
purely from oh, you ready to hire me again for the next song? Not like that, but also to show that I care. Like I'm excited for when the song comes out. I want to make sure that I can post about it. I want to, I want to see the artwork. I'm excited. I want to, know what's going on in your head when you're trying to promote this, because I'm genuinely interested. So again, it's not a 3 foot long pinky finger quirk, but it's definitely something that I see as being totally normal, and that's just what I do. But I don't run into other people that
Yeah. I
do
think
it.
you really are like on the money with like following up and just making sure that everybody has like their song is out, they're proud of it, and you're showing that you're proud of it also, and like it's not just like released into the ether and then you forget about it. You're there and you're like you're proving to the artists that you're working with that you're part of their team, and that gives them probably a lot of confidence to push forward, and their win is your win and your win is their win, and
Yeah,
that whole thing, it's amazing.
yeah, yeah. I never. I mean, I'm sure I thought about it like that before, but I never. I don't know. No, I'm just thinking about. I'm thinking about myself in different ways now. This has been
Great.
an interesting
This
conversation.
is definitely yeah. I'm liking our kind of like meta conversations because they go in like really weird places, but they're drawing interesting new things out of each other, uh, and it's kind of cool.
Yeah, no, I
Hopefully
like it a
people
lot.
are enjoying. Hopefully people are enjoying this, this kind of an episode. Like it's definitely Sonics is definitely morphing into something new, and like kind of like the AI episode. We don't really know where it's going, but it's hopefully it'll go in good directions and new directions that'll help us and the listeners in different ways.
Hopefully, we will do more good than harm. I think
I
that's
don't.
it.
Yeah. Well, like what kind of harm are we putting at? Take everything we say and you know with take it either with a grain of salt or don't, or
Or a
this is
block of
just
salt. Yeah,
yeah, or just do the best you can with it, and hopefully at the very least hopefully it inspires you to get working and do good work, and lean into your quirks like we do, or even more so than we do. Double down on yourself, be the best you that you can be, because
yeah. Go get them, Tiger.
We don't need another Serban because we already have a Serban. We need a new you.
Yes.
So the listener out there,
Exactly.
go
Exactly.
make your own waves, right?
I'm just waiting to see how many more like throw pillow motivational phrases you can you can say.
I'm done.
Ben, I love you.
Love you too, brother.
Bye, Ben.
Bye, Carl.
What was that?
I just said bye, but I felt like I had to say Carl also.
I think your brain just broke.